Former Browns wide receiver Andrew Hawkins talking about Shedeur Sanders. Does he believe he can be Browns QB1 next year?
If you don't have a quarterback you are in love with, Shadur could absolutely be your starter. Now, there are things Shadur has to get better at. He has to mature it. And in the NFL, it's not a matter of if he can or he can't. It's really get the opportunity to, because that's not how the NFL works, right? Like, you don't get, this isn't college. We're not building you up. And even now, college is not that way, but we're not giving you multiple years to figure this thing out. But the things that, in my opinion, that Shadur brings to the table are the ones that you can't really teach. Where he has to be a little better is operationally. Being able to make that decision of when to take what's given to you versus always trying to get the play, always trying to create more time, sometimes at the detriment of your offense, at the detriment of your team, and at the detriment of your performance.
Tom, that's well stated by Andrew Hawkins. You can't have you almost need catastrophic insurance for the sack or the interception because the sacks they're not 3-yard sacks, they're 15-yard sacks, and you're looking at second and 25. But if you don't love one of the quarterbacks in this draft, don't take one because you think he's the best that's out there.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment by Hawkins, by the way. I thought that's kind of where I was leaning as well, Dave, is that, I saw enough development and progress by Shadur over the last, 5 games, let's say, that I was encouraged about his potential and where he could go next year. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't feeling that way when he first took over the job. I thought he really had a long way to go. And in talking to people in the building over there, knowing that he was far behind when he got here. And I know all the Shadur fans will go crazy, like, oh, you didn't give him a chance. And, that's baloney. He was ready to play from the get-go. He wasn't. And I think if you heard some of Shadur's comments over the last month of the season, I think he'd be the first to admit that he needed the experience. He obviously needed the practice reps. That goes without saying. But then I think he needed the in-game experience and those moments that you just talked about, Dave, where, instead of taking the 12-yard loss, he's got to throw the ball away. Saw a little bit of that, maybe not as much as we'd want to see. Obviously, as I mentioned before, with all the variables, the offensive line was a mess. Didn't really have many targets. Didn't have much of a running game at all. So there's a lot that we can look at with Shadur and say, well, if this, if that, what have you. I think I saw enough to at least allow him to compete for the starting job in week 1 next year. I think that goes without saying. Now, in terms of who they bring in as the new coach and whether or not he feels the same way about Shadur, we'll see. That's why I think if you do have a little bit of stability in that you keep Schwartz and you keep Tommy Rees, then maybe there's not as much of a critical eye about Shadur as you would have if you brought in a new coach and a new staff. So we'll see. I'm with you. I think now, especially because you're down as far as picking 6th in the first round, although you do have the 2 first-round picks, and I still maintain that trade with Jacksonville was made last year with in mind that they could make the move should the quarterback be available. Now, it would take you to get up to number 1 to get Fernando Mendoza, who I think is clearly the best quarterback of this class. The other thing, too, Dave, is when we talked about this quarterback class last year, how much it has changed. I mean, obviously, now not coming out has really shuffled things along. The guys that we talked about at the beginning of the year, your Nussmeyers, guys like that, have dropped down to 2nd and 3rd round grades now. So, and that'll change again as we get closer to March and April. Suddenly one quarterback's going to be making an ascension and another guy's going to be dropping. So I think a lot of things are on the table. Whether or not the weekend 1 quarterback is on this roster, I would think so. But I do think if they ended up getting a quarterback in the first round, then I could see a scenario where Shedeur Sanders would not be here next year. I think the Deshaun Watson situation is still worth watching because he's still under contract. You still made that monstrous investment into him. And if you need him to fill a gap for a year, you go that way. Also, you're going to have plenty of veterans available in free agency, whether it's your Mac Jones, your Malik Willis, on and on and on. There's a bunch of guys. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat in this game. So once again, we're talking quarterback. Once again, we're talking coach. Once again, we're talking about the Cleveland Browns. those things will never seem to be separated.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is, and Browns fans are going to throw something at me here. I don't think this roster is as bad as it's portrayed nationally. The defense is really good. Your running backs, I like the run. I like Dylan Sampson. I like Raheem Sanders. I really like Quinshon Judkins. I like Fannin. Now, you need wide receivers. You need offensive line, and you need a quarterback. So you need the foundation of a good passing offense, which is why when the national people look at it, they say, "Oh, it's terrible."
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, defensively, obviously, I think the roster is in really good shape. Can you add some more depth at linebacker? Obviously, I mean, with the Schlesinger injury, there's still the JOK situation. I still think you got to, shore up that linebacking core a little bit with some more depth. I feel the same way about the secondary. I mean, you can't have enough of those guys because you know what? One or two of them is going to go down next year. Martin Emerson coming back would be a huge bonus. And I think, a lot of people forgot about, what a blow that was to lose him in training camp this year. But Dave, I mean, that offensive line is a mess. They've really got nothing coming back there. I think, if Joel Bitonio comes back for another year, God bless him. I don't know if that's going to happen. But otherwise, you don't have anybody coming back. Damon Jones, or DeJuan Jones, rather, we don't know what his situation is going to be at left tackle. He's suffered a season-ending injury in his first 3 years in the league. So major holes on that offensive side. That's why, obviously, I think it's important for them to think about an offensive-minded head coach when they do make this decision coming up. But still enough holes. But I'm with you. I think nationally people, the Browns are an easy target, and it's one that's always glowing, and it's always one that's easy to hit. And I think that's why from the outside people really like to sling arrows at the Browns whenever they can.